Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast. Join me, Robyn.
And me, Michelle, as we chat openly about personal growth, creativity, and building a career in the arts. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 18th episode of the Stream of Art podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about imposter syndrome. But first, as always, we do our little weekly check-in. So, Robyn, how did things go for you this week?
Things went pretty good. I finished, I already told you guys last week, I think, that I finished the commissions. So I got those dropped off and they're now in their new home and it's lovely. And I continued to work on my website stuff and I've been more active on social media and I'm slowly becoming more comfortable sharing stuff slowly.
Nice.
So that's just kind of a work in progress still. I get easily overwhelmed with social media stuff, like, and because I am trying to come up with a bit of like a bit of a marketing strategy, but like I find it so hard to focus. I get so distracted by all the different things you could do.
Yeah.
And coming up with just like a simple plan just as a start, like, you know, I make it more complicated than it needs to be, for sure. So there's still some work to be done there, but yeah, it was a pretty good week, I guess. It's a bit of a blur. I think I was productive, but I don't really remember. How was your week?
My week was pretty good. So there was kind of a lot going on, but also not a lot. It was very weird. So one of the things I talked about in the last episode was how just overwhelmed I was feeling. And I thought what I needed to do was just take a step back and try to just get my arms around everything.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of that this week where I created a page in Notion that was just like a mind dump. So anytime I had any thought about something I needed to do or wanted to do, I just added it to this one big page. And then I resurrected my task system. So I actually have a really great task system in Notion that I don't use often enough. Like when I use it, it's very effective.
Yeah.
But as is often the case, I just get out of the habit and then, everything's all haywire and I don't understand why. And then I bring it back and I'm like, this helps me get stuff done. So what I was doing was I was going to this big list and then I was just taking a few things and moving it into my task management system. I have a section just for like all the tasks I have to do today. And so I just put like 3 or 4 simple tasks that I could get done. Or I would take a bigger task and then break it down into chunks and then do like one of the chunks. And so I did that through the first part of the week just to kind of knock some things off of my to-do list, like especially in my mind. I had so many little things that I knew needed to get done. And putting it on the task list really was great incentive. Like I loved being able to do something and then check it off the list.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's very satisfying. And I feel like that's probably why using checklists can be so effective when you're trying to get stuff done. Yeah. I know that can lead to problems. There's what Cal Newport calls like checklist productivity, where you're always thinking in terms of like just getting stuff off a checklist. It can be effective when you keep it in context. So obviously I have there's other work to be done, but that was really helpful. And it was helpful just to get me feeling like I was effective, like I got stuff accomplished that again just needed to be done, and it made me feel like I was on top of things, even in some small way. Again, this is like gonna be a kind of a long process to get everything up to that level, but just to for this week be able to feel like I was on top of things, it was really nice.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of, what I'm ultimately going for is not just getting stuff done. It's about feeling like a capable person, which I'm realizing I haven't really felt in a long time. So that was really nice. I think that was a nice step towards doing that. So on the Artist's Way front.
Oh, yes. I forgot you were doing that.
This is week 4, and we had a reading deprivation week. So I couldn't read anything.
That'd be so hard for me to do. Not.
It was, well.
It would be hard for you. I'm terrible at reading.
Well, it's really interesting because that was my first my first reaction when I found out that that's part of what I had to do for this week. I was like, nuts to that. Like, I can't not read.
Right.
Like, what do you take me for? An illiterate? No, like, I couldn't, I was not having it. But of course, like, I wanted to keep an open mind and I figured there's got to be a reason. So when I actually did the reading for that week in the Artist Way book, she was talking about the idea of just allowing for there to be a break in the input you're taking from other people. Like, rather than taking other people's ideas, giving yourself a chance to just sit with your own and sit with your own thoughts. And so that I'm fully on board with. I've been a proponent of cultivating that kind of solitude for the last couple of years, ever since, of course, getting into Cal Newport. That's when I started taking walks without music, without podcasts, without anything like that. I started just going and just being with my thoughts and spending more time just in that silence. So once I realized what it was she was going for, I'm like, I'm totally on board. Like, I get the value of that. It was still really challenging to not read, but of course I went and I made it more challenging. I didn't listen to any podcasts. I didn't even read my morning comics. Like, I cut out just output, except music. I listened to music. That was the one thing I still did. And it was quite a confronting experience because I feel like I've gotten a lot better at being able to just be alone with my thoughts, but it was really challenging. I was finding myself wanting to grab something to listen to, and not even necessarily that I was like, oh, I want to listen to this podcast or I want to like watch this live stream. It was like, I need to fill up the space. Yeah. And I hadn't realized how much I was turning to that until I was confronted with a week of not being able to reach for those options. So it very sneakily crept into my experience again, where I was reaching for things as a distraction without even realizing it, which I think to me just demonstrates how easy it is to do things without thinking, just kind of fall into these habits, into these ways of being without even realizing it. So it was really humbling to be confronted with the amount of work I still have to do. And it felt nice because it felt kind of like a reset. And two, it gave me the chance to get curious about the things I was feeling and I was thinking. Because obviously I was reaching for these distractions because I didn't want to deal with the stuff I was feeling and I was going through. Right. And so to sit there in the quiet, just like eating lunch or something and go, I'm really lonely. And to not be able to go, well, time for a podcast, like to have to go, okay, no, well, let's dissect that a little bit. Like, what does that really mean? Right. I saw this quote not too long ago that, the reason we feel lonely isn't because we aren't connected to other people. It's because we're not connected to ourselves. And so I really wanted to like get to the bottom of like what it was that was going on with me, that I felt so lonely. As somebody who I never really thought of myself as a lonely person. I always felt like, I enjoy my own company, but it made me wonder, is it that I've been enjoying my own company all these years, or is it that I've been very good at finding things that hold my interest or keep me distracted? Oh, interesting. So it was a really interesting sort of experiment almost, where then I had to be confronted with just being with myself. And the more the week went on, the more I liked it. And I feel happier than I have in a while, just like being with myself. So I think it was a win. And it has me rethinking my approach to how I consume, especially like the self-development books. Yeah. Like the fiction and stuff like that I read. I like to read history and philosophy and all that. But like when I'm reading all of these like Cal Newport style books, like the ones I'm taking in because I want to pick up something that I can then apply to my life, I think I need to give myself some more space after I've read one to like sit with the idea a little bit. Yeah. So my friend was telling me about this idea that he calls integrating. So like when he reads this kind of book, he gives himself time to like really integrate the ideas into his life before he then moves on to another one, which is very different to how I was doing it, where I have so many of these books to read that I just read one and then immediately go to the other. Right. So I think I'm going to play around with giving myself some time, even if I'm just taking the time to then like take my notes and transfer them into Notion, because I have stacks of note cards that need to be moved into Notion, which is another thing actually I should add to my big list because I have so many of those cards. But I just feel like I always want to be reading, so I just reach for the next one and reach for the next one. So it's again, it's that thoughtless input. It's where I'm not really intentionally considering how I'm ingesting all of this information. And I always want to be intentional. So it was kind of a nice reset, a nice wake-up call for me this week. So one of the other things we had to do was an extended artist date, which I have to sort of think in terms of I think she had said plan a full day vacation on the weekend or something. Because I have the cat to think about, I can't just disappear for a whole day. But I thought, okay, I'm gonna go do something. So I bought a ticket to go see a movie on Saturday.
What movie?
I was gonna see Monkey Man.
Oh,
and
I haven't even heard of that. I'm out of touch.
I think it just came out.
Okay.
I had no idea. I wasn't going to see anything specific. I was just like, let's see what's there.
Right.
Let's take this one. It was like 1 p.m. on a Saturday seemed like a good enough time that it wouldn't be too busy. Probably I'd miss all the people going for like the Saturday night movie. And,
sure.
And I'd be able to like be back in time to take care of the cat because I was going to walk there. It's like a 45-minute walk. But then I got sick. So I bought the ticket on Wednesday and I was like, this is one of the things I put on my task list. I'm like, okay, look into a movie, buy the ticket, print it out. I did all of that. I got the directions for when I had to walk there. I printed that. I had everything ready. It's all still sitting here on my music stand. And then I get sick on Friday. So I ended up not going. But I was still proud of myself for actually having committed to something.
Right.
And I would have followed through. If I wasn't sick, I would have gone. And of course, there will be other times to go. Like, I'll do it again. It's not a huge deal, but it was just the timing was very interesting that this is the first time I've had a cold or anything resembling a cold in like 6 years. And it's like right as I have scheduled something.
Right. Of course it is.
So, yeah, of course. But I mean, I made the most of it. I spent the day just like chilling out and playing video games and listening to like my fun podcasts and stuff. Since I'd got all week not listening to podcasts, I was like, I'm gonna listen to my fun podcast. So yeah, I still had a nice weekend. It just, I was a little disappointed as 1 o'clock rolled around. I'm like, I should be at the movie right now.
Yeah. I'm curious with the Artist Way, because I know you're doing this, you're working through this with a group. And did anyone mention instead of reading deprivation, social media deprivation?
Oh, that I also did. But I'm not sure. I have my meeting right after, so
okay.
Maybe somebody else will have done that as well.
Because it's like for me, the bigger thing. Like I actually would like to read more than I do. Like I don't read very often, so for me, the bigger thing is disengaging from social media because I'm on there a lot. Well, I'm mindlessly scrolling, of course, but I'm also looking at a lot of artists because I follow a lot of artists, and I think there is that sort of like. Avoiding that constant input really resonates with me because I do wonder sometimes like how much of what I'm seeing is influencing what I'm doing in a way that isn't authentic to me. You know what I mean? Like you're doing because you see other people doing. Yeah, I was just curious because of course that book was written like pre-social media, right?
She definitely didn't mention it.
So it's kind of interesting because it's like there almost needs to be an adaptation of that book to modern times. I don't know when it was originally written. Do you know? Because things have changed so much in terms of what we consume.
Yeah, this is like the 25th anniversary edition, so I feel like it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
I think 1992.
Yeah. Okay.
Was the original.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So I mean, like that predates internet.
Yeah.
So like the amount. Yeah. So it would be. I wonder if anyone's thought of. There must be kind of like there must be people who you take those concepts and kind of work with them a bit to make them a bit more relevant.
Yeah, well, and I think that's it. I think the way she explains it again to me, it made sense in terms of just cutting down that input and just letting yourself. And I had a conversation with somebody this week. They were talking about because I was talking about my experience doing this reading deprivation and just cutting out that input. And he was saying, it is something we so often overlook is like the internal wisdom that we all have. But we feel this compulsion to constantly be taking, because there's so many options and you're wanting to get as much of it as you can. And so you just want to keep putting things in. You, like I said with you know, me and reading these books, is I have so many to read. I just want to get through like one after the other after the other after the other. But if you could, instead of doing that, give yourself that space to just tap into the stuff that you know.
Yeah.
Instinctively, intuitively, all of that, just to learn to trust yourself and to trust your own wisdom. I think that just helps to provide some more balance, because, you know, there's always going to be other input you can bring in from other people, but there's only one you, you know, kind of thing. And what you think and what you have to say, what you feel, that's all important too. And you want to take that into account. And then you let that inform how you implement the stuff that you're learning, the stuff you're taking in from other people. Because there's value in all of that, but only as much as you can actually apply it and make use of it. If it's just information coming in, I mean, it's, you know, might be interesting in the moment, but how much is it really benefiting you?
Yeah, we've been kind of conditioned, to like look to other people for answers. And so I think that's why like kind of the self-help genre, personal growth genre, like I think that's why it's so popular and has such a strong foothold, because everyone, like we all looked for someone else to tell us what to do to live the best life, and we don't often feel like an authority on our own lives.
Yeah.
At least that's my experience, and I'm sure other people have different experiences with it, but it was just a very strange thing.
Yeah.
And so we just keep consuming. It's like, it's addictive. Keep consuming. And for me, like I find those books really interesting as well. And it gives me that kind of hit of like, oh, okay, no, I figured out a piece of the puzzle. But then I never really implement. So
yeah. And I think it's such an easy way to feel like you are making progress by reading something. And again, it's not going to be all or nothing. Reading is incredibly valuable, and getting opinions from other people who, you know, especially when it comes to books where they've spent often years researching and thinking about these ideas, and then they've put it into something that you can take and make it work in your life. There's, I think, tremendous value in that, but it's always about keeping it in perspective and never losing your connection to your own insights and your own thoughts, your own life, and all of that. And I get it too, because it is, and I felt that this week, it's a nice way to not have to face the really hard things that are like the internal things that we struggle with, like the fears and, you know, the uncomfortable feelings and thoughts and all of that. When you are taking in something, it's a distraction either way from that. And whether it is actually beneficial or not, you know, ultimately anything you do to distract yourself is going to keep you from being able to really make progress, I think, until you face those things that are the most uncomfortable.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, a book is a better distraction than social media, but it can be used, if you take it to an extreme, as a way to shut out any of your own thoughts.
Right.
And feelings.
Yeah.
That. Actually, that might sort of segue nicely into our conversation on imposter syndrome, right? Looking to others for the answer, feeling like we don't really know what we're talking about or know what we're doing.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome was such a heavy thing for me, because it's something that I've experienced it intensely over the past 4 years in a way I've never experienced it before. And it's pretty raw, because I'm still like, I'm in the thick of it, and I hate it so much. Like, it's so uncomfortable and frustrating, and frustrating because I know it's holding me back, and I'm keeping myself small because of it. And I'm so aggravated by that.
Yeah. I think that's the worst part about something like imposter syndrome, something like we've talked about, like the fear of failure, fear of success, is when you know that it's getting in the way of you living the life that you really want to live.
Yes.
Or gets in the way of you being the person that you deep down want desperately to be.
Yeah.
And you feel like, because it's not a physical thing. It's not a physical thing blocking your way. It's not standing behind you, holding your arms back, keeping you from going and doing the things you want to do. It's this feeling. And I think when it comes to these kinds of feelings, we feel like we should just like get over it, right? Just get it out of the way, just do the thing. You know, we see other people doing it. Like, why is it so easy for them? But I think it's so important to acknowledge just how challenging and tangled this sort of thing is, and how deeply rooted this stuff can go. You're just saying, like, you've been really dealing with this like the last 4 years. That's a lot, you know? So I think I just want to validate your feelings of frustration around it, and, you know, likely overwhelm and all of that, because there's often many layers to it, and trying to sift through it is no easy feat.
Yeah, and it's just kind of an interesting thing, because for me, it feels like as the years go on. So when I was younger, I thought that life trajectory would mean that your confidence grows and your imposter syndrome begins to diminish as you become more confident in yourself and in your abilities. But I feel like the opposite has happened for me in many ways. I'm in a weird place because I do know that I have a lot of skills and strengths. So I am aware of that. So I do have this kind of confidence, but the imposter syndrome is still very strong and very loud, and louder than it was when I was younger. So like when I was younger, I remember writing a blog. I did a couple blogs, and one of the blogs was on writing. That was when I was actively writing. And then I did another blog prior to that about like political type stuff, like things that
interesting.
Yeah, but things that I had no business writing about. I it wasn't like I had any kind of, particularly with the politics, right? Like it was all just opinion based. Like I had very little knowledge. I was like in my early 20s. Like I didn't, and with an art history degree, like I didn't, you know, but I didn't feel any ounce of, oh, I shouldn't put this out there. Like I'm not worthy to put this out there. And now I feel like I don't even want to write a blog about painting, because it's like, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. I shouldn't be, I have no business putting this out there. It's just, it's interesting that I used to be able to generate and throw my ideas and my thoughts out there without any kind of fear that I wasn't good enough. But now I hold off because I don't know enough yet. And it's almost like the more I do learn, like every time I learn a new thing, I also learn about 10 things that I don't know about. And so I'm less and less confident in my own knowledge or something. It's really weird.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you said that, because I was just making a note. Yeah, I wonder if it's that at this stage, you're just no longer seeing the value in your perspective. Because if you were able to write about writing in politics that you're saying you didn't have any business writing in, I'm sure you had, you know, you had enough knowledge to be able to add something. But I think it's about recognizing that, you know, you had your perspective. I'm wondering if some of that is coming from this diminishment of your perspective, if you're not seeing the value that your perspective brings. Because especially for something like art, like, yeah, like exactly what you were saying, like the more you learn, the more you realize how much there is still left to learn. I'm having that exact same experience with music. Like every time I learn something new, it's always like, and then here's all the other stuff that comes after that this has unlocked that you still don't know. And that's, I mean, I think I've long ago accepted that that's just part of the ride. And, you know, for something like for you with art, you know enough that, like, you know what you're talking about. But yeah, you still have stuff to learn, but I think there's so much value in your perspective, because it is, you know, especially when it comes to any kind of an art form, there are going to be different ways of approaching it. And we've just seen that doing this podcast. You know, I'm always so excited to hear your perspective on art, because it's yours and it's informed by your experience. And I can see too, like with the art you create is so incredible. I want to know like how you think about it and all of that. So, you know, I wonder if maybe part of it for you is reclaiming the value in your perspective, and not not coming from a place of being like when you're in your early 20s, you think you know everything. Because that's usually the place that you,
Guilty.
I remember being, same. It's a very different place to operate from rather than that place of like, oh, I know everything, which is where you tend to come from when you're younger. When you come at it from this place of recognizing that you've acquired a lot of valuable perspective, but also saying, well, I obviously don't know everything.
Yeah.
And there's room to learn, there's room to grow. And if you can be somebody who has the humility to have their mind changed when new information is presented, I think that's a great place to come from, because nobody has all the answers. No matter what anybody tries to tell you or sell you, nobody has all the answers. Everybody's just sharing the perspective they're coming from. And there's always going to be room for your opinion to change and your perspective to change. But I think it's a sad thing for anybody to just withdraw and not put out their perspective just because they don't feel like they know everything, because it's just not possible.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things going on for me, because it's like I don't want to know everything, and I'll never know everything, and that's fine. But I think subconsciously there's a fear of putting myself out there without knowing everything, because then I run the risk of someone calling me out and me being wrong, or and then I end up feeling stupid. And that's where it's like there's kind of a self-defense mechanism that kicks in for me a bit as well. And yeah, and I think you're right. Like there's this kind of resistance to putting myself out there, because I honestly don't have any value in my perspective. Like what do I have to offer that hasn't already been offered? There's so much noise out there. And for me, I feel this kind of like, my thoughts aren't interesting enough for me to join in the conversation. Like, I'm not an interesting enough person. I don't have interesting enough experience for me to take up space at the table. Like, that is basically how I feel. And not just in the art sphere, but like within just my workspace as well. Like that is genuinely how I feel. I like talking one-on-one with people like that. I don't feel that same sort of feeling one-on-one, but the idea of putting like thought content out into the world, I start to feel this kind of like, who are you to be doing? Why? Like, why you? And I guess I think that is imposter syndrome. Like, because it's...
Yeah, very much so.
I have other people kind of on a pedestal, and like those people, they're the ones that should be talking. And this is what I mean by, I see now how I'm keeping myself so small because of this overwhelming sense of just unworthiness, essentially. Which is really annoying. It's so annoying. And it's so annoying because there's nothing that anyone can say to me that will get me out of this. It's something I have to figure out on my own. And I don't know if you hear the phrase fake it till you make it. And is that what it is? Like, I don't know, but maybe that's just what I have to do. Maybe it's something you just have to live with this kind of constant feeling of discomfort and unworthiness. I don't know. I don't know how to move through it. So tell me.
First of all, to tell you, yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I have thoughts. And I'm just like, how much do I say? Because I know I'm somebody who's often like, I have all the answers. Not that I have all the answers, but I mean, I often will have solutions, and I'm trying to be better about not sharing them where they aren't wanted. But if you want them, you are going to have them. So first of all, I would just like to say, I think you're incredibly interesting, and I always really appreciate your perspective and your thoughts on things. Like, I love our conversations, and I always get so much out of them. So again, I know hearing that from family is not the same as hearing it from objective people, but trying to speak as objectively as I can. I do think you have a lot to bring to the table, and I would love to see you feel the same, but I know it's a journey, so I'm not going to try to like sit here and fix you, because it's I know it's a journey.
I appreciate I appreciate you saying that though, but again, like, it's just like, to me,
I know it's Yeah.
Because I have that thing, I can't remember what the term is, but like where you just kind of dismiss positive feedback. You know, there's an actual term. There's a term for it, but
I haven't heard of that term.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So I would say on the term, like, or the idea of like fake it till you make it, there's this quote I love from Ryan Holiday that's like, you know, the other term for faking it till you make it is fraud.
Yeah.
So that might not be the best approach. I you know, I get where people are coming from, the idea of like, just pretend you're confident until you actually feel it. I don't know that works.
I also don't like it because I think one of my values is authenticity. And I have a repulsion with people who fake their confidence or like only put out like a certain image of themselves when they feel something different on the inside. And I have such a repulsion to that because it actually causes harm. Because then we're moving through a society where we think, you know, I feel broken, but I look at everyone else and it's like none of them are broken. So what's wrong with me? Yeah. It's like actually everyone's broken. They're all just faking it. And it drives me absolutely insane, especially when we have a mental health crisis on our hands. It's like we need to be honest now and own the fact that none of us know what we're doing. And we all feel lost and we all feel small and we all have insecurities. And so that fake it, when I hear someone say, oh, you got to fake it till you make it. No, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not going to put out this image of myself that isn't me. That's not how I want to move through this world. I refuse, because it's also a rejection of myself. And I'm not going to reject myself. You know, like, I'm not going to fake it till you make it. Is an awful, now I'm on a rant. It's an awful term because it's like every time you fake who you are, it's telling yourself that you're not good. And it is reaffirming that idea that you're not good enough and you have to be someone else. Yeah. So we've canceled fake it till you make it. We've canceled failure, fear of failure.
Yeah, we're going to have to start like a bulletin board, like of all the things we've canceled.
Yes. So sorry, that was a side rant.
No, I thought that was wonderful. And again, what a brilliant perspective. I don't think I'd thought about it that way. The idea of faking it as a rejection of yourself.
Yeah. Like, can we just be okay? Like, maybe half my problem is that like the world just isn't set up to be okay with the fact that we like are all navigating just a mess. Like,
you know, I had this thought last night. I wrote about it in my journal last night and this morning because it felt like such a big thought for me. And I think it kind of ties in that, you know, I've been on this fairly serious self-development journey for a couple of years now. And it just seems interesting to me that the better I become, the messier things are and the less clear things are. There's like this, I think I came into it having this idea of like what I had to do and who I had to be and how I had to clean things up. I wanted things to be clean and tidy and all of that. But I'm realizing how much power comes from being able to embrace the parts of me that are flawed and that are messy and that are all over the place. And, you know, think having this week having a moment where I was like, because I've often struggled with just, you know, I am somebody who has a lot of thoughts and has really big, deep feelings. And I was finding myself constantly apologizing for that. I'm like, why are you apologizing? That is just who you are. Stop apologizing for, you know, even if it's messy and if it makes other people uncomfortable, the people who are worth it are going to stick around because that is just who you are. Yeah. And I think you really hit on such an important point. And I think that's what you would want to lead from in putting your stuff out there, is to just be authentic, just be genuine, just be yourself in all of that messiness, and how much power comes from reclaiming who you really are. And that includes all of our faults, because we are all kind of a mess.
Yeah.
But we all have our strengths and we have our weaknesses, and they kind of work together to make us who we are. And so there are just always things we're just going to personally be struggling with. But it struck me as interesting that that's sort of where I'm getting to my journey, is like embracing the things about myself rather than feeling like I have to fix myself. I'm actually finding that the thing that's made the biggest difference is in learning to accept myself for all of that messiness and for all of the stuff that I still don't know, and to just kind of like chill out about it, to not let myself be wrapped up in so much angst around not having all the answers or not having myself figured out completely. Because I'm learning new stuff about myself all the time. And, you know, it's just kind of the way it goes. But how would you want it to be any other way? You know, this is how humanity works, because we all have something different to bring. And we all come together, and it's not any one person's perspective that is going to be the thing that is of value. It's everybody's perspectives coming together, and then there's some kind of sense made out of all of that.
Yeah. And when you were just talking about big emotions, feeling deeply and stuff, that's something that I have as well, where like similarly, I always kind of felt like it's something I have to figure out how to shrink down, you know, like, because my emotional responses to things can be big, like not in like I feel intensely, right? And I always felt kind of wrong about that like well-adjusted people don't feel so intensely. And I think I haven't finished the book yet, but Glennon Doyle's, you know the book, what's it called?
Untamed.
And there's a story in there, and she was talking about how, I think when she was going through her divorce, and maybe I already talked about this on the podcast, I don't know, it stuck with me, but her, like, you know, the rest of the family had kind of moved past it, but her daughter was still really struggling with this. And the way that Glennon Doyle talks about it, she was saying, you know, her daughter was a reminder, like her daughter's intense emotional response to this was a reminder of the gravity of the situation and how big this was. And I really liked that. And I was like, see, that's what I am. That's what my emotional response is. It's a reminder to everyone else. Like everyone else has kind of moved past this and has kind of put it behind them and, you know, head down doing their work. And my emotional response is a reminder that this is actually this is a big moment. This is something that we need to really think about, or we need to pause here, or we, you know, whatever. Everyone has aspects of their personality that they've been made to feel like wrong about. But like those aspects, I think, have a function. It's just that function isn't always clear to us, or hasn't always been acknowledged. And it is kind of sad, because it means that there is all sorts of stuff that people, you know, part of their personality or part of their core being that they just kind of shove down or disregard or whatever, because they were never really taught the function of that part of themselves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Yeah. So how many of us are depriving the world because we're keeping ourselves small because we feel wrong?
Right. And it's not even keeping ourselves small necessarily. It's like cutting out parts of ourselves.
Yeah, like shaping and conforming ourselves to what we think the right way to be is.
And so then we start to wonder, like, why is everyone so like depressed and sad and anxious? And it's like, because we're slowly just cutting parts of ourselves out, especially with social media, as we see all sorts of curated images of what it is to be an artist or to be a professional or whatever. It just gives us more and more information about the shape that we need to be. And so then we get those scissors and we start cutting ourselves to size, and it just never actually works out.
No.
Then we're just wonky.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something I've come to realize is that I think I spent so much of my life feeling like I was broken, like I couldn't live my life until I figured out how to fix myself.
Yeah.
Only to now, very recently, realize, I'm not broken. It's just how I operate. And it's different than how other people operate.
Yeah.
And it means I struggle in ways that are different. But, you know, so that acceptance has been really helpful. And hopefully if anybody's listening is feeling that, you know, you're not the only one. I think obviously like we both feel that. And I think it's quite widespread, that feeling of what's wrong with me.
Yeah. And what's crazy, and this is why we need to have these conversations, is because if you were to ask me a year ago if I thought you had those feelings, I would have said no.
Yeah.
You know?
Right? We all have to talk more.
we need to talk, and particularly men. I feel so badly for men, because there's not that same kind of emotional safety in having these vulnerable conversations.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
So let's bring more of that to art and to music.
Yeah.
You know, I think you can't separate those things. You can't separate the art and the creativity from who you are. in what you feel and what you think. It's all part of it.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's one of the things she's trying to get at with the artist way. Creativity is a spiritual experience. It's part of which you can let that be something that encompasses your whole being. Like it's a full body, full being experience. You can't compartmentalize. So for a lot of people maybe struggling to make art or to make music or to put their stuff out there, there's probably some deeper stuff going on, which I think is maybe what I was trying to get at earlier, where it feels like this really big thing to get through. And it's probably because it is. There's a lot more to it. So as we've just through this conversation been talking about it, you get deeper and deeper and deeper, and you realize just how much we're all carrying around inside of us. If we could just find a way to get it out and get some perspective, I think it would be really helpful. And how much it all ties too. One note I made was that this sounds like it ties in a little bit to your fear of judgment.
Yeah,
your fear of
100%.
rejection.
Yeah.
Like that's what you would be rejected for.
Yeah.
Is like, you got something wrong.
Yeah.
So therefore we reject you. I think it is helpful to acknowledge that those are the kind of some of the people you're gonna deal with. There's this great quote from Marcus Aurelius that he uses to open, I think, book 2 of Meditations, where he talks about all the terrible people he's going to meet within the day to prepare himself. And he does it to prepare himself so that he can meet them with patience and understanding, and with an understanding of his connection to them, that we are all made for one another. So that's something I've been thinking about as I'm, more and more preparing to put stuff out there is, when you get something negative back from somebody, it really is just because they don't know any better. They don't have a better way to make themselves feel better, and that's often what does it for them. Or they just don't realize, the number of people who just they'll say something without thinking. And so if you get something wrong and they go to correct you, they might say it in a way that to them is they don't give it a second thought, but to you it feels really harsh or really cruel. I think that's where it's helpful to try to give other people the benefit of the doubt. But I think if more of us talk about these sorts of things, I think more people would want to approach others with that empathy and that compassion, so that when you see somebody says something that's wrong, you don't go and attack them. You can offer to say, hey, actually, it's this way or whatever. And especially if you're somebody who's open to having your mind changed, the people you're interacting with are hopefully going to be the people who are generous in their offering of, another perspective or the right perspective if it's that you're completely off base with something.
I mean, the reality is there are going to be people who, like, if you're putting your thoughts and feelings out there, there are going to be people who say no to that, who reject that.
Yeah, of course.
So maybe it's also just kind of a matter of figuring out a way to feel comfortable with that. And maybe for me, a way of becoming comfortable with that is really tapping into who am I trying to reach with what I'm sharing, and focusing on them. And because what I say and share is not going to resonate with everyone, but it's going to resonate with the people who need to hear or read whatever I'm putting out there. So focus on those people instead. Focus on the people you're trying to help or whatever.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on the people who say no to you.
Yeah. That's what Seth Godin calls like the people you seek to serve. You're not going to be for everybody. And you can't, because if you try to be for everybody, be all things to all people, what you put out is so watered down. It's not anything of substance.
Yeah. And I know that with art, like with painting, but like with my ideas and opinions, like this podcast is a perfect example, right, of something that I've been hesitant to share openly because of that fear of someone disagreeing, which is insane, because it's like I disagree with people all the time, and sometimes there's judgment, but sometimes it's just like that opinion's not for me.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, to expect people not to disagree with you is actually pretty like egomaniacal.
It is, yeah.
But there's just, I mean, it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable and it's scary, I guess. And
yeah. Adam Grant talks about imposter syndrome really beautifully in his book, Think Again. So he talks about how, in theory, confidence and competence go hand in hand, but in practice, they often diverge.
Yeah.
So One of the things he talks about is armchair quarterback syndrome, which is like the guy sitting at home on his couch watching the football game thinking he knows more than the coaches.
Right.
So that's where confidence exceeds competence.
Right.
And then the flip side of that is imposter syndrome, where competence exceeds confidence. And, you know, something that Adam Grant talks a lot about is rethinking. So that's his big thing, is rethinking, like learning how to rethink. And what happens when you are somebody who is an armchair quarterback, you are unable to rethink. There's something to be said for, you know, somebody who has imposter syndrome. At the very least, there's likely an openness to have your mind changed. But the problem is that people who are competent, who could do a good job, are often holding themselves back. But one of the things that he talked about that I thought was really interesting was how he offers 3 potential benefits of having imposter syndrome. One is that it can motivate us to work harder. One is that it can motivate us to work smarter. So, you know, if we don't believe we're going to succeed or we're going to win, we really don't have anything to lose by rethinking how we do something.
Right.
And it can also, he says, make us better learners. And then there's this great quote from Elizabeth Krumre, I'm not sure how to say it, Krumre Mancuso, a psychologist. Learning requires the humility to realize one has something to learn. So I think for me, as far as imposter syndrome goes, it was, for me, just a fear of being found out as like a fraud. I get this all the time with my teaching, not so much now because I'm like standing more in like what I know and what I still have to learn. But for a long time, I was very resistant. I was so worried about being like wrong or found out as like not knowing something.
Right.
And for me, the worst part is that it made me closed off. Because I've talked about in the past how my identity was tied to like being good at music. And part of that was about knowing everything. Like I'm the musician, I'm the teacher, I should know it all. Of course, not that I thought I knew it all. I was excited to still be learning stuff, but I hated not having an answer. And that was because I had this lack of confidence. Even though I was competent in what I was doing, I didn't have the confidence to be able to say, I don't know that. I'm actually going to look into that.
Yeah.
You know, just to be able to say, like, I think that's a big part of it for me, was like being able to embrace the ability to say, I don't know. This is what Adam Grant calls having confident humility. So where you have confidence in yourself and in your ability to learn, but you have humility when it comes to like the tools and the systems and strategies you use. So you're willing to change your mind about those. And that's something I've been doing actually this week, is I've been restructuring my routine just a little bit, as I'm trying to make it be something that better serves my values and what I'm really trying to work for. So having that rugged flexibility that Brad Stulberg talks about. So making sure that there's flexibility in how I do things, but I make sure that there is that ruggedness of my values and all of that.
Right.
So for me, that I think has been the biggest thing, like being able to get to a point where I'm comfortable being wrong, where I'm comfortable not knowing something and not letting that make me feel like I'm stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's something you had mentioned earlier about feeling like you don't want to be proven wrong and like made to feel like you feel stupid. You know, I think that's such a universal thing for those of us who are maybe prone to imposter syndrome.
It's interesting because like those feelings of stupidity, my earliest memories are memories in which I felt stupid. So it's a pretty like I remember there's some very core memories from kindergarten and me sitting there trying to do a craft and looking around me and everyone's doing something. Everyone else is doing a different thing. Like they're all doing the same thing, but it's different than what I'm doing. And realizing in that moment that I didn't understand what I was quote unquote supposed to be doing, and feeling stupid and slow and behind. So it's funny because when I'm in these moments, and I had a moment like this during the week where I felt like that little kid again, who like didn't understand. And I felt so small and so dumb. And none of the people that, you know, because I was in a meeting, it wasn't anything that they said necessarily. They weren't intentionally trying to do this, right? It's just that's how I was triggered into that kind of reaction. And then it threw me, like it felt, I still feel bad about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that stuff that ties into stuff from childhood.
Yeah.
That stuff really really gets you, really grabs you. Now you're making me wonder if I have any of that from my childhood too, because I think that is an area I feel pretty sensitive about. Is like anytime I feel like somebody's tried to make me feel stupid. That I actually am pretty sensitive about that with like particular people. I'm having some realizations, but yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from, and I feel like it's an awful feeling. And so of course you'd want to avoid it, as much as possible now, because it totally makes sense.
Yeah, because I'll be in these situations a lot where it's like, by nature of the work I do and the people like I come in contact with, I'll be on a call and it's like I'll kind of realize like I'm the only one here that doesn't really know what's going on right now, like, and it's and then it brings me back to that sort of core memory from when I was a little kid. And I'm the one sitting there not really understanding and everyone else is getting it. Yeah, and it's like I know I'm not stupid. It does mean that there are certain things that I avoid in life so that I'm not put in those situations. So there's, which closes me off to opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that's the real shame is that, our own lives are diminished because we're not taking these chances. But also the lives of others are diminished because they're not getting the benefit of your insight and the stuff that you have to offer. There's this really beautiful quote from Tiago Forte's book, Building a Second Brain, where he talked about how there might be people in the world only you can reach. Nobody else would be able to reach them, but the way you explain things, your life experience, whatever you bring, your authentic self, you'll be able to reach somebody that nobody else can.
Right.
And that is such a waste if you aren't putting yourself out there. I think about that a lot. And I feel like that's a lot of my tension that I feel internally, is that I'm really not living with integrity because I feel so strongly about wanting to help, like specifically musicians, but of course with our podcast, other artists as well. Like I want to help people, but I'm really not behaving in ways that would suggest that's true because I'm not putting my stuff out there the way I could be.
Right.
And that's all my own personal hangups and my own stuff that I'm dealing with. And so there's probably a large part of my dissatisfaction in life is the fact that I'm not living in alignment with what I claim to value, with what I claim is my purpose.
Right. Yes, which I've learned through therapy, that can be a huge contributor to kind of that internal stress and frustration and sadness and all of that when we're not living in alignment with our values, which I should probably revisit actually, because I can't remember. I mean, well, I know one of my values is authenticity for sure, and I'm definitely not living in alignment with that. Integrity is another one of my values as well, and I think, like as you were saying, because I realized too that I want to help as well. I haven't quite pieced together how to do it with my art. Like, so I haven't quite figured out how to kind of work it into my art practice. But as like you were saying, like if you're not living authentically, if you're not putting yourself out there and showing up the way that you're wanting to show up to help people, then you're also not living with integrity. Like there's a misalignment there. Yeah, I need to revisit values.
Yeah, I had that thought recently too. Like, I think I need to go back to some of that core stuff. As I'm doing a lot of rethinking of some of the structures I have, I want to come back to that to make sure that's all still where I want it.
It's really tough though, because to live in alignment with your values, like it takes courage to do that in some cases. And I think most of us probably aren't living in alignment because it does take an immense amount of courage and there's no one telling you have to. So it's all self-fueled.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to push yourself to do a scary thing when you're only accountable to yourself.
Yeah, definitely. We will let ourselves down 1,000 times.
Yeah, because we also want to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And if you're not forced to do something that feels threatening, then it's like, obviously we're going to default to protecting ourselves from that threat.
Yeah.
That perceived threat.
Yeah. It's interesting how good we are at thinking and talking about these things. When it comes to actually doing them, it's really hard. In the moment, you really just have to do it. And it's like, I don't want to do it.
It's so funny because I did have that thought earlier. It's like, I feel like, we're going to end this. I'm going to be all empowered to just be like my authentic self. And then I'm like, nah, it's not going to happen.
It's too scary. Maybe next week.
Maybe next week.
Year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking a lot about. I'm like, I do just have to get on that. But I will say, I think there's something to be said for the work that you have to do internally to get you there. I don't think any time is wasted when you are exploring what matters to you, what your hangups are, what your, past injuries are from like childhood and stuff like that. I think that is an important part of the work. It just can't be the only work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like I think about like with us starting this podcast, like that was pretty nerve-wracking. Now we just don't give it a second thought. We were like, oh, it's episode 18. Like, oh, we've been doing it that long already. Like, wow, okay. It's just kind of a thing that we do now. And it's, and that's what everything could be like. Everything that seems scary before you do it, once you get into the rhythm of it, is just like, it becomes another thing that you do.
Right. So is that how I walk myself out of this immense fear, is just slowly taking, I mean, it's exposure therapy, I guess, which is what I've been trying to do on social media, like sharing more openly and still not very openly at that, but as kind of just exposure therapy, because every time I do it and I don't get hate back, it's that kind of like my brain is learning that this is okay. So is that just the trick, is just slowly trying things?
I think that might be it. You just got to do a little bit and a little bit and a little bit.
And I guess that's kind of what they mean by fake it till you make it. I just hate that phrase. I think there needs to be a different phrase.
I mean, I love the phrase day by day, drip by drip.
Yeah.
Which is one I got from Seth Godin. That's become my mantra since I read that. And that's just what I'm for everything, because it's like everything that I'm doing, I try to remind myself, like, it's just day by day, drip by drip, just one little bit at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time.
One move forward at a time, and that's what gets you there. Because I think we often get stuck in this mindset that we have to make like a gigantic shift.
Yeah.
And that's what feels overwhelming, because you're like, well, I can't do that. That's way too scary. Or I can't, I don't have enough time. I don't have the money. I don't have the blah, blah, blah. Rather than saying, well, what's the like next logical step I could take?
Yeah.
That would get me a little bit closer. Like for me, like, because I've really got to get on that YouTube channel. I know that's going to be something that'll really help me reach people, or has the potential. Obviously, I'm not guaranteed for it to be a success or to reach people, but I know that that's something I have to get done. And so rather than thinking like how I'm going to start this whole YouTube channel, I just got to write a script.
Yeah.
And I don't even have to write a script. I have blog posts that I can rework into scripts.
Yes.
So it's like the work is already done for me. I just have to take that first step.
Yeah.
And make it a priority. So, I think breaking things down in that way makes it feel more manageable.
Yeah, I like the one step at a time. I've been saying that a lot to myself, because I start to think, I go down the rabbit hole of all of the things I need to do. And it's like just one step at a time. Like, don't worry about that stuff. You have it marked down in Notion. I use projects and tasks in Notion. So I have like, right now I have a project sitting there that's for developing workshops. And I just dump my ideas kind of when I have them, and I leave it there, and I don't action anything, because it's not that time. It's not time for that yet.
Yeah.
So like one day at a time helps me kind of focus on the next thing that is going to move me forward in the direction I'm already moving. Because I don't want to I could stop and start developing workshops, but then it'll move me forward, but I've now lost momentum in this other area. So it's like, just,
Yeah. So imposter syndrome.
I feel so heavy now.
Yeah, I actually feel quite a bit lighter. I don't know.
Oh,
maybe it's okay. Maybe I dumped all of my, I did a big trauma dump all over you. And now you're carrying all the weight of my.
No, I feel like I trauma dumped on you.
Oh no.
No, it's just I think I'm in the thick of it right now, and
it sure sounds like it.
Yeah, and it's been something that it's timely that we were talking about this, actually, because it's something I came face to face with over the week.
Yeah.
And I really I hate being here. It's so frustrating, and maybe ultimately that's a good sign. Like, maybe that frustration, because I think you don't start to deal with something truly until you really get just tired of it, like, you have to hit that kind of rock bottom point of like, I'm just tired of being this way. And then that's when you seriously start to work on stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So I think ultimately it's probably a good thing that I'm feeling this kind of heaviness. It's just that this is the uncomfortable part of the growth process. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at this stage, being really compassionate with yourself. I think it's one thing to be frustrated with where you are and with what you're feeling, but I think if you can create separation so you're not feeling frustrated with yourself, where you can have that compassion, have that empathy for yourself, to be able to just separate the challenge and the feeling from you and your value and your worth. I think that'll really help. That's been helpful for me anyways, trying to like separate those things and not be so quick to label myself as broken or wrong or whatever.
And I think my frustration, it is kind of separated. It doesn't feel personal. Like I don't feel like I'm frustrated with myself so much. I'm frustrated with the situation.
Okay.
So it's good. And of course, like the situation is my own brain and the way it's processing and all that. But it's not, I don't feel an internal anger. It's just like, I am so frustrated that this is the way it is right now. And I want it not to be this way. So I should be able to move through it without being super mean to myself. I'll update you next week.
Yeah, please do. I think ultimately the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to work through it, to not just accept your fate. Not that I think you would, but I think just generally speaking.
Yeah.
To not get to that point where you feel like you'll never make progress. Because, there's something to be said for the comfort of staying where you are. Like it's familiar. It's disappointing, but it's familiar.
Yeah.
But the unknown, it's the way we have to go. And it's really scary, but you just have to move through it. I think we've talked before about how sad it is for people to not reach their full potential, and what the world is deprived of and what people are deprived of from not living authentically and with integrity and all of that.
Yeah.
So I think for me, as far as, again, like my dealings with imposter syndrome, I really want to be able to put my thoughts and my ideas out there and to speak from a place of confidence and competence, because I have a lot of experience, but to always approach things with a willingness to have my mind be changed.
Yes.
So like I want to be really open about the fact that I'm always learning, I'm always challenging myself, I'm always growing. Like I am a work in progress, but I'm going to share what I have now because a lot of the stuff I've come up with has really helped me.
Yeah.
And I'm working with students and it's helped them. So I want to take the stuff, I don't want to wait for that to be like completely perfected because it's just never going to happen. So I want to take the best of what I have now and put it out there. And that includes my music too. Like my music's always going to get better. I don't want to wait for it to be perfect before I put it out. I want to share my stuff so that I can have more opportunities to make more and put more out.
Yeah.
So I'm finding a lot of comfort coming from that place of just being open about where I am in my journey. Be like, yeah, I'm pretty far into my journey, but there's still a long way to go. We all have our gaps and all of that. And just to have that confident humility.
Well, and I think you and I are both like, we're lifelong learners. Like I remember thinking like,
100%.
If I won the lottery, I'd be going back to school. Like if I didn't have to, if I just had an endless amount of money, I would just keep going back and getting degrees. Like it's just, I love learning, learning new things and stuff like that. So like, and I wonder if that contributes to me and not feeling very self-assured in my own ideas. Like,
maybe
I've actually, this is something I've experienced a lot on the podcast where like I'll when I'm making notes and stuff, I'll be like, wait, but have I said the opposite before? Because it's true. Like there's things that I've said earlier in the podcast that now I'll contradict in future episodes. And so that might be part of the reason why I'm hesitant to put anything out there, because I know that what I'm putting out there is going to change in another 5 years as I learn more and as I have different life experience and all of that stuff too. Right. So yeah, I don't know.
I mean, well, that's one of the reasons why actually in the show notes, I always include the date that the episode was recorded, because this is going to be a bit of like a timeline for our growth and improvement.
Yeah.
because it can't not be. As we have conversations every week, yeah, our opinions are going to change. We're going to forget something we said and definitely contradict ourselves. Like, I'm sure I've contradicted myself a bunch. It's kind of the nature of just how our brains work. You know, we've got a lot of things we're trying to juggle and try to sort through. And these conversations are part of how we make sense of the stuff that's going on in our heads.
Right.
And sometimes the stuff that goes on in our heads is contradictory. You know, it's paradox.
Right. Yeah.
That's, you know, that's the thing with this podcast, is that it's not meant to be this clear, definitive collection of our precise thoughts and ideas. It's us trying to work through what's going on in our heads and sharing what we think now. But it's always going to be changing, and I think that's a great thing. And then we can have different outlets that are a little bit more like definitive.
Right.
Like when I eventually write my book, that is going to be much more a clear expression of my ideas and where they sit. And they'll be much more cemented.
Right.
Although again, not without room for growth and change. You know, I don't think anything is ever completely set in stone.
Yeah.
And then we just wait for our people to find us. Because if we keep showing up and sharing what we've experienced and what we think, the people who are going to benefit from that will find us. And then we'll have our people. And, you know, I think that's just the way it goes. And then we create a community where if anybody disagrees with us, they are immediately banned.
That's right. And then we have the power. And then we'll never feel imposter syndrome ever again.
Never again.
Because we'll have created our own echo chamber.
Yeah, exactly. The consensus will always align with our exact thoughts and feelings and beliefs.
# life goals. But I mean, as far as cults go, that'd be our cult would be pretty good.
It'd be pretty tame. Like it would mostly involve talking about animals and
TV shows,
music and art, and TV shows,
yeah
and books. Everybody would have to read books. That might be the one difficult selling point, because not everybody is as into books as I am. But
right.
Everybody should at least check out Think Again by Adam Grant, because it is a great book. And actually, you have that book sort of by way of Mike, because I got him that book for his birthday.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
So if you're interested in reading it, it's already in your house.
Okay, excellent.
Actually, in his book, I anticipated this conversation, and I was like, there you go. Thinking, many thoughts ahead.
Yep.
No, I don't think that far ahead. His other book, Hidden Potential, is also really, really good. I feel like you'd really enjoy that one. That resonated with me a lot.
The amount of, like, every time we talk, you give me another book recommendation, and I have so many books that I need to read, and I do not read that much. I have been reading Cal Newport's, though, Slow Productivity, which is like really, awesome. Really quite interesting.
Yeah, that's a really great read. I was telling my friend, I have a friend who really likes Cal Newport, and we were like both super excited about this book. And so we were just talking about what we thought about it. And we were both pretty much like, yeah, it was a really enjoyable read. You know, we already both knew these ideas from hearing him talk about them on the podcast.
Right.
But I was saying that I really enjoyed his writing style this time. And it's interesting to, you know, hear him in the book talk about how his interest in movies has influenced his writing, and I feel like I can see that. Like the way he writes compared to like his last book, A World Without Email, I think felt a little bit more classic Cal Newport.
Yeah.
This feels like, it still feels very much like a Cal Newport book, but just the way it was written is, I feel like he was thinking more in terms of telling a story.
Yeah.
So it made it a really interesting read.
Yeah, I haven't read any of his other stuff, so I have nothing to compare it to, but I see what you're saying, because there is that kind of storytelling element to it, and it makes it an easier read.
Yeah. The audio commentary, actually, that reminds me, I have to finish listening to that, but he released, as part of the pre-order bonuses, he released this chapter by chapter audio commentary where he talks about how he structured the chapter the way he did and like his thought process. And from the ones I listened to, I think he was very much thinking in terms of creating this like nice narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, as he's also trying to share these very practical ideas.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, it's a really great great book. It might be one of my favorites of his. That and probably Deep Work are probably my two favorites. Although any of them are incredible. That's another recommendation for everybody listening. Go read Cal Newport.
Just anything. All of the things.
Anything of his. Yeah, his first few books are for students. So he has like How to Become a High School Superstar, How to Win at College, and How to Become a Straight A Student. Which I haven't read the first two. I read How to Become a Straight A Student because I was trying to look for things to help my students who are students.
Yeah.
I have a lot of music students who are still in school, and I wanted to have some resources just to help them get their schooling under control because I'm realizing how much of an impact that has on their ability to practice music. So
yes,
I was doing that for research, which was quite good. If I think just as anybody interested in learning, I think that it's a nice little book. It has some really helpful hints. But yeah, it's certainly any of his, I guess, more grown-up books. They're all really, really amazing. Anyways, we're gonna have an episode where we talk about slow productivity, and then I can talk about how much I love Cal Newport then. But for now, I guess we'll get it wrapped up. So, do you have anything specific going on this week?
No, I think just kind of continuing with social media stuff, and the thing that's really hard about that is I'm trying to be more active on Instagram, and I'm trying to kind of start using Pinterest as well because it can be a good way for artists to generate some traffic to their website. And the thing that's cool with Pinterest is that I might have talked about this before. So with Instagram, the lifespan of something that you share is like 48 hours. With Pinterest, it can be like 4 months. Like you can be, so there's things I posted like a month ago that are still getting new engagements.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes a really worthwhile investment, but it takes time to kind of build an audience and get some traction. And I'm not even close to getting like any significant traction on there. So anyways, yeah, I want to continue kind of working on that stuff, but it's hard for me because I'm trying to strike a balance. And like I have noticed over the past week that my mood has been lower. And I don't think it's a coincidence that, the week that I've started to engage more on social media, my mood has started to decline. And so I'm trying to think of a way, like, how do I balance it? Because I think it really does impact me in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
But, which I think is probably why I was so adamant earlier on about not using social media to promote myself. But now it's like, realistically, this is the point I need to start at anyways, because that's where I have a bit of an audience already.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how to do it in a way that's healthy because I am it's disgusting. I'm impulsively checking to see like, ooh, has anyone liked this? Particularly because I have that fear of rejection coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so every little like is validation or confirmation that I'm not rejected.
Yeah.
And it is addictive. So I'm struggling a bit with that. It's just wanting to share more, wanting to be more out there.
Mm-hmm.
But then the platform on which I'm doing this is actually quite toxic for me.
Would it surprise you to learn that I have a book suggestion for you? Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. I actually think you'd get, and I have all these books too. I can like all of Cal's books. I can lend them to you if you want. So
I also love how sometimes you refer to him by his first name.
Yeah,
it's like him like personally.
Cal. Yeah, I kind of do that. I don't know. I do that when I talk about like the people I read because I don't know. He's my guy. He's Cal.
Yeah, he's hanging out on your bookshelf.
I have this elaborate plan to work my way up to being his best friend. So, just putting that out there.
Is there a way of like tagging his podcast in our podcast?
I don't know. My strategy is to use everything I've learned from him. So to be so good, he can't ignore us.
Right.
And then he'll want to be my friend and we'll hang out and go to the movies together. Anyways, no, so what you're saying, I think it's such a universal challenge for people who feel like they need to be on social media to share their work, but experience the toxic side effects.
Yeah.
And I mean, Cal talks about this a lot on his podcast as well. There's probably YouTube clips you can find of his podcast that'll like address that specifically. But I think being able to read the book Digital Minimalism will give you a good perspective and philosophy around how to approach social media and all of that. And one of the things he talks about is just having boundaries. So where people tend to stumble is when they use needing Instagram for their business or for their art or whatever as an excuse to just be on Instagram all the time. Yeah. And you can substitute any other TikTok, Facebook, wherever somebody is. There's that impulse to go check, go look for the likes, go scroll, and then you lose all your time. So what he recommends is having just these barriers, these boundaries around it. So I don't know how you create content for Instagram, but you could batch create content. And then you can have like designated time where you go to Instagram. And I don't know if you can like delay posts where you can have scheduled posts or something. If let's say your strategy is to release something like every day, Monday to Friday. If on like Sunday you had all those posts ready to go and then you scheduled them, and then you don't have to go on there at all until like the following Sunday. That's just an example. You can do like a once a week where you have designated Instagram time where you're seeing how well posts do. You're seeing, if you have comments, you can respond. If you get DMs, you can respond. So you have structure to what you're doing. And then that way the rest of the week you don't have to think about it. Right. But you're still, as far as everybody else is concerned, you're still there. Right. It's just it's within these boundaries that allow you to maintain your happiness. And I wonder too, just because I felt better this week than I have in a long time, and I wonder if that came from just not being engaged in anything. And yeah, like I went all week not checking Instagram. I went on yesterday to just check my messages, and I'm a lot happier. And you don't realize it until you have that moment to acknowledge, actually, it's made me feel pretty bad. To be on there all week, or I feel a lot better without it. So, I would think in those terms is how can you structure it so that it's taking up just a small footprint. Right. And you're still getting the benefit without any of the drawbacks. Also, something he argues for is newsletters as being a much more viable way of getting your business going than social media.
And that's what I want to shift to. But in the meantime, I have to like, where do you start? It's hard to build an audience for your newsletter just with a newsletter. Like, you kind of need to promote it somewhere.
But that could be like where you're focusing more of your time during the week, for example. So again, if you've got Instagram like sorted and Pinterest sorted, and then it's like taken care of through the week, the time you would spend during the week normally going on Instagram and doing all of that, you can invest into that newsletter and getting that up and running. And then you'll have something of substance to share through your Instagram. Yeah. Not that I'm implying that your Instagram posts are without substance, but I tend to think of social media in general as being not really anything meaningful.
It is kind of structured that way, right? Like
yeah.
You can go deep on things, but people don't consume it on that level. It's just kind of a quick, you look at the picture, you like it or you don't like it, you move on.
Exactly, yeah.
Or at least that's how I consume. I mean, I know other people who've built an audience and they do share really quite deep things and stuff. It's just I don't know how they make that work for themselves, but
yeah, this is definitely something we could have a full conversation on someday about social media and all of that.
Blech. Yeah. So what do you have going on for your week?
It's a really good question. I mean, Artist Way week 5. And then what else I'm doing kind of depends on how I feel. Like, I feel a lot better today, but I don't want to make the mistake of going like full gung-ho Monday morning and just make myself sick again. Yeah. Like, I want to respect my body, and it's obviously telling me I need to chill out a little bit. So yeah, I think this week is going to be a little bit of like a wait and see how I feel. I have certain things I want to get done. And again, I'm going to continue with going through my list and knocking some tasks off, and then taking a look at some things like my bigger projects, like I mentioned, YouTube, getting some scripts done and all of that. So I can just get on getting it done, because it's got to get done. Yeah. It's got to make the push. So yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and I'm going to be reading this week. Ooh, that is for sure. But with a renewed relationship to how I read.
Yes.
New perspective. And probably a new sleep schedule. So I made the decision this week that I'm going to drop the 5 a.m. get up time. What I'm going to experiment with is setting my alarm for 6.
Yep.
So that I'm not getting up too late. But I'm going to get up at whatever point I wake up between 5 and 6. Because I tend to wake up like 5:30-ish.
Yep.
Seems to be more, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, depending on how I've slept. But I've decided to stop fighting how my body works.
Yeah.
And to honor the fact that I can't seem to fall asleep early enough at night, and that when my alarm goes off at 5, it wakes me up right in the middle of a sleep cycle. Like, I feel like if I just had a bit longer, it would finish. So I'm going to try that this week.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Again, I'm thinking in terms of like trying to rethink my tools and my strategies and not be married to like, I'm somebody who gets up at 5. That's not the thing that matters. Like, I'm trying to think about my values, about that rugged flexibility. So what is it that I'm trying to accomplish? Because I was trying to fit in these things that were really important to me in the morning. But what I actually did, because I was listening to music while I had supper this week, because I wasn't able to read anything, I really enjoyed that. I'm like, I can stick my listening time in the evening while I eat dinner.
Yeah.
Perfect. Like, taken care of. So then that way the morning I get up at a bit more of a flexible time. I'll do some reading. I'll do my meditation. I'll play with the cat. And then I'll still be able to start my music by 8 o'clock. But then I can have my listening time in the evening. It feels a little less rushed, I think, too. I'm not trying to cram so many things in the morning. So it gives me breathing room in both directions.
Yeah, and you don't need to be listening to music first, like in the morning. You don't need that brain power necessarily, right? Like, that's the same with me with painting. It's like I had to choose, like, what am I going to do in the evening versus the morning? Because those are the two chunks of time I have to work with. And I'm doing the writing and the more kind of cognitive stuff in the morning, and I'm doing the painting in the evening. I would rather do it in the morning, but it's like, I need to think of where do I need the brain power kind of thing, right?
Yeah, so, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to try that and see how it goes. And again, just trying to be more open-minded and less stubborn and rigid and just have, just try to make things work better for me rather than trying to make myself fit into something I've decided needs to work. Make things work for me and how I function.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's similar to me. Like, I set my alarm for 6, but it's always... if I don't set my alarm, I'm up at 6:30. So it's like, I feel like, it's just a little too early.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sleep is important. I think if I've learned anything in my life, it's that I need to honor that. Otherwise, I'm not very fun to be around for myself or anybody else. Also, I'm just not as happy. But yeah. Anyways, thank you everyone so much for listening. You can send questions and comments to streamofartpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram. We are at streamofartpodcast. You can follow Robyn on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram. There are links in the show notes. You can join our Discord server. Again, the link is in the show notes. And I hope you all have a great week. Hope you all get to make some nice art. Get to pet some cute puppies.
Ooh.
And we will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.